I'm here with Juanita Campbell Rasmus. Juanita is a pastor, spiritual director, and contemplative with passion for seeing people transform into being their best selves in our world. Juanita co-leads the St. John's Church in downtown Houston with her husband, Rudy. And Juanita has just come out with her first book. It's called Learning to Be, Finding Your Center After the Bottom Falls Out. It just released on September 15th of this year. So Juanita, it's really great to have you here with us.
Well, thank you, Brian. I'm so glad to be with you.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to meet you. And I have to give a shout out to Pam Perry, who introduced us to each other. And Pam was one of the speakers at our recent Publishing in Color conference that we just held online last week.
Congratulations.
So Juanita, maybe you can kind of tell everyone a little bit more about your background and,
Sure.
how this book came to be.
Well, yeah, I'm a native Houstonian. I've been married for 35 years. My husband and I started a church together, St. John's downtown. We started with 9 members. And it rapidly grew. 7 years into the work, we had 3,000 members. And the book came out of my experience of having had a major depressive episode. And I learned so much on the recovery journey that I just knew I had to put it in writing.
Wow. Well, that's unfortunate that you had to go through what you had to go through.
Yeah, I tell you, at the time, Brian, it was absolutely the worst experience of my life. I remember clearly saying that I wouldn't have wanted an enemy to experience what I experienced. But the reality is, the scripture talks about lest a grain of wheat falls and cracks open on the ground and dies, it cannot bear fruit. And that was so clearly the experience with me and the diagnosis of depression. I've had an opportunity because of this experience to be able to encourage others, to remind people that you can live with a mental health diagnosis. The key is you're going to have to learn to live differently. And that's no different from any health diagnosis a person gets. You get diabetes, you learn how to regulate your sugar intake, So it's about teaching people that they can live with a diagnosis, but it does mean living differently.
Well, it's so wonderful and so important that you're talking about this, right? Because I think, in years past, people would try to hide it, things like this.
Exactly. It's amazing to me. We talk about everything from the neck down,
Exactly.
but we don't talk about anything from the chin up.
Yeah.
And yet, if we're not able to clearly talk about the things that are happening with us mentally and emotionally, we really perpetuate more dysfunction. And we also continue to isolate those who need companionship often more than anybody else. And that is a person that's going through a time of difficulty, who's trying to navigate the mental health arena, trying to navigate what it means to live with a diagnosis.
So how's the book structured? What are the different parts of the book?
Well, the book has a really beautiful flow, I think, but of course, I would say that. But basically, we start at the beginning of the book talking about kind of my background and my history. I talk about being a good little girl and how I believe that played into my experience of what I call the crash. Because for me, the diagnosis was literally everything was fine one day, as best I could tell. And the next morning, after preparing breakfast for my family, I couldn't get out of bed. I slept 18 to 20 hours for months on end. And so the book moves from my experience. It's set up as a memoir. It moves from my experience of the crash. And then the things I began to learn about myself that I felt impacted the experience of the crash. I begin at the end of each chapter, rather, I provide what's called a pause to reflect. It's a place where you're not just reading Juanita's memoir, but you're getting an opportunity to say, wait a minute, how do I relate to that? Or how does that affect me? Or the pause to reflect gives the reader an opportunity to step into that space and to look around in it and to feel it out, to see what might be life-giving in that space for them as well. And so I'm grateful that the way the book got formed was really influenced by my editor at University Press. Cindy Bunch had, long story, but for 10 years, every year we attended a conference together. And for 10 years, once a year at that conference, she would say, let's have a glass of tea together, right? And try to encourage me to write this book. And so I owe a great deal to her because of her constant annual check-in with me to see if I was ready to write the book or not.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Wow. I actually just finished another book launch interview with another author that works closely with Cindy Bunch.
Oh, wow. Small world.
Isn't that amazing? And
Amazing.
this is Victoria McAfee.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Victoria met Cindy like 30 years ago.
Wow.
And, since then had done several books together with them.
Well, it sounds like Cindy has certainly got a record of persistence.
Isn't that the case? Yeah, that's just wonderful to hear. So the book is available in hardcover and ebook and audiobook, from what I understand.
That's right. It absolutely is. Anywhere you purchase your books, you can purchase Learning to Be, Finding Your Center After the Bottom Falls Out. That's
excellent. Now, I can imagine, because of the pandemic, you haven't been able to do many in-person speaking engagements.
Exactly.
But I would think that there'd be a lot of demand for groups to have you come and speak.
Absolutely. And particularly now during COVID-19, one of the things people ask me is, did you write this book for COVID-19? I did not, but it is so timely because all of us globally are experiencing a mental health event thanks to COVID-19. We're all experiencing some kind of shift, some kind of disorientation. We all had a life, no matter what that life might have looked like before COVID-19. And now all of us have a slightly different life. Because of social distancing and all the protocols to try to keep one another safe, it has created the second aspect. And that for me is what I'm calling the mental health protocol. We've got the washing down, we've got the 6 feet apart down, we've got the mask wearing down, but what are we doing to secure the mind, emotion connection as we move through this global pandemic? And so for me, the practices in the pause to reflect section of Learning to Be are very apropos for what we're experiencing right now. Can I share one with you?
Yes, please.
So as an example, one of the things that I've been doing with some of the groups where I've been speaking is one of the aspects that people will say to me that they feel most distraught about is the fact that they can't connect with family and friends. And so one of the meditations that I've been doing is inviting people to sit up tall and straight in their seat, to put their feet flat on the floor, to turn their hands palm side up and rest them on their thighs. And so then I invite you to take some deep breaths. Come on, Brian, breathe with me. Breathe in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And just stay with the breathing. And then I invite them, if they're comfortable, to close their eyes and remember the last gathering where they were with family or friends or colleagues, and allow themselves to go back into that memory. Because you see, the brain has this incredible power. When we go back into a good memory, those good feelings get regenerated in us all over again. It's the beauty of what neuroscience is teaching us. And so we can go back to that last wedding. We can go back to that last birthday party or the last retirement event or the last gathering, the last picnic. We can go back there in our mind. And this time we can look around that memory. We can see expressions on faces. We can hear comments. We can hear the laughter, and the body reproduces all those endorphins and all those feel-good chemicals all over again. And so for people who are feeling lonely, they can move into that kind of meditation. And I've had people just tell me how refreshed they felt when they came out of it, because that sense of being alone was lifted because of that memory meditation.
Wow. Isn't that incredible how the human brain works?
Phenomenal. And when it doesn't work, equally as phenomenal.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Well, I kind of do something similar to that when I go to bed at night. That's how I get to sleep. You know,
Oh, wow.
as I think about something that was either really good from this day or some past memory,
Oh,
like,
that's beautiful.
to try to just like put myself at peace a little bit.
Sure, sure.
And so that, that's just so great that you've been able to help people, through this time,
I'm
through that
grateful
kind of
for that.
experience that,
Yeah.
and practice that you're describing.
Well, and what you just said about doing a practice where you go back through the day and look for a good memory, that's really called the examen. St. Ignatius of Loyola in the
Oh,
13th century, when he was training his monks, because they were a dual career monk, they had to have a regular job during the day and then try to do the work of the monastery when they finished their day job, if you will. And so he would say to them, now you might get so busy you can't take mass on a daily basis. Or perhaps you'll get so busy that you can't pray the hours. But don't abandon the practice of the examen. And we share that in Learning to Be, where at the end of the day, you take some deep breaths, you reflect over the day, and you look for the good. You look for the way love flowed through you or how you receive love. I always like to say it this way: what gave me life today? And I reflect on it. And then I give thanks for it. But then secondly, I look over my day again and ask the Spirit to show me places where maybe I didn't love so well or I didn't receive love well. And then I ask myself, how might I have done that differently? And then I'm thankful. I give thanks for seeing it, because if we don't see it, we can't change it. And so in seeing it, giving thanks for it, at the end of the day, you have an opportunity to be filled with gratitude, which helps to promote a pretty good sleep, I must say.
exactly. I mean, that's been real helpful for me. I know, so I'm glad that you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
Since you're more of an expert in this than I am, I mean, by a long shot.
Well, I tell you, you've been using the practice and it's working, and that's the key. The practices that we use that work, those are the keepers.
Sure, sure. So do you have any ideas for a follow-up to this?
I do.
Good,
Uh,
good.
the thing that I'm already working on is the Learning to Be experience. It's a 3-hour, 2.5-hour workshop
Hmm.
where I empower people to take a look at two key factors that are embedded within Learning to Be. Number one, who am I? Because with the crash, what I came to realize is that I had focused so much of my life on doing, on the external, on the awards, the certificates, the pat on the back, the approval, the affirmation. Everything was external. And it was all based on my energy. And that's how I was feeling validated. And so what the crash caused me to do was to reevaluate who I really was.
Hmm.
And it had to be a new definition, one that didn't include roles or titles. And so I had to begin to learn to see myself as the one who. I am Juanita, the one who is creative. I am Juanita, the one who is adventurous. I am Juanita, the one who is a gardener. And so I began to develop and expand my sense of self. And that self was not dependent on anybody else's existence to affirm me. And so for me, a great part of the experience of the crash was letting go of my need for other people's acceptance and approval as a way to define my identity. So
Wow.
we're going to work with that. And then the second thing we're going to work with is, one of the things that's been so amazing to me is that while COVID-19 has been the most probably significant crisis, certainly one for humanity globally, it has also proven to be a sacred, safe space in many ways. This is a chrysalis space. It's the place where prior to now, we had as I said, a certain kind of orientation. We'll call it a caterpillar life. And now we've come into this chrysalis, this place where we are dying to many old ways of thinking and being, but we've not yet been transformed into our highest and best self yet. And so for me, I'm talking to people about the life they want to live post this crisis,
Mm,
post
mm.
this social justice uprising, post the political dynamics in America, post COVID-19. And so we're looking at envisioning 2023. And we're doing some work around that so that we can bring that energy, just like we could go back to the past and we could bring that fun-filled memories back with times with friends and family, and we can use it to fuel us. We can also use our dreaming from 2023 to help fuel us through and learning to be the person who will live the life we envision for 2023.
Wow, I really like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We did a test with it and we had a great response, great feedback. So we're as of November the 7th, we'll be doing our first Learning to Be experience.
Excellent. Well, after this election is over, our country is going to need a lot of healing.
Exactly.
And, what you're talking about is going to contribute to that.
That's my heart's desire.
Yeah, it's going to be so badly needed. It already is badly needed, but
It is indeed.
so, well, that's wonderful. Do you have like plans for another book,
I've
follow up?
already got a second book. It's coming out the spring of next year, and it's called 40 Days of Being a One, where we look at being a one on the Enneagram, and I do a devotional every day that gives us an opportunity to pay attention to what we're paying attention to as ones. Ones are very rule oriented. We're often very performance oriented. We're often perfectionists in our work and in the way we see the world. We often are dualistic thinkers, seeing things as having to either be black or white, brown, rich or poor, good or bad. And then here I come into ministry that has 9,999 shades of gray.
Excellent. That's a great way to say it. That's very cool. Very well. So I'm so glad that you've already got that in the works.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about it.
And to be available, next
Two of
year.
my colleagues have already had theirs published. Hunter Mobley did the 40 Days of Being a 2, and then Sean Palmer did the 40 Days of Being a 3. And these are also by University Press. So I'm in good company.
Excellent. Yes.
One of the really cool things about this 40-day series is that it's written primarily by Black and brown persons, or I'll say people of color and indigenous people, which I think brings a slightly different bend to it, if you will. And I think that's what's going to make this series one of the most sought after series as it relates to the Enneagram.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm really glad that you're doing that. I'm really glad that InterVarsity Press, is working with you on these books.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
It's been a great partnership.
So, Juanita, I really want to thank you for spending some time with us to tell us all about your work more broadly than just, this specific book that you are coming out with. But, that sounds pretty powerful in and of itself. But you've got these other things going on, too.
Well,
the program and the future book. And I'm so glad to hear all of this because, as you said, it's so timely.
I'm grateful for that. It's been amazing. So often when you talk to a publisher, they'll say, well, who is the target audience for your book? You know that question, right? The famous one. And
Sure.
I would always say, everybody. And of course, that's the question they don't want to hear. They want to know there's a market niche. But COVID-19 has really made Learning to Be a book for everybody because we all are experiencing change. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and the timing couldn't have been better.
So besides, going to your favorite bookstore or InterVarsity Press, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can reach out to me through my website, Juanita Rasmus, Juanita, last name Rasmus, RASMUS.com. And I'm on social media in the same way, Juanita Rasmus on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So you can't miss me. And if you put Pastor Juanita, that'll probably come up too.
Well, I'm a big proponent of suggesting to authors that they spend time building their platform. So it sounds like that you're doing a great job at that.
Well, thank you. I'm doing my best, and I've got some great people who've come alongside. You know, none of this can be done in a solo or in a silo. You need help, and so I'm grateful for the people who've come alongside me.
Well, excellent. Well, I'm sure that people will be glad to hear more about this. So thanks again for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me the invitation.